Imagine inheriting a massive, impregnable fortress. Your father spent his entire life building those walls, with blood, iron, and just brutal compromises.
Right, and everyone in the realm basically expects you to simply walk up the steps, take a seat on the throne, and rule from behind the safety of those parapets.
Exactly. You have the armies, the wealth, all the established alliances, but instead of taking the easy succession, you just, you drop the crown.
Wow.
Yeah, you open the heavy portcullis and you walk out into the freezing, untamed steppes completely alone. You just abandon everything that keeps you safe.
It's a wild premise.
It really is. And that is the exact, incredibly dangerous scenario teased for our protagonist, Xu Feng Nian, in the promotional breakdown we are looking at today. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we are unpacking a massive promotional release from the Source Top Drama World, detailing the highly anticipated arrival of Sword Snow Strides Season 2. And right out of the gate, this source material makes a very bold promise to you, the listener.
It really does.
It claims that this new season might completely change everything you thought you knew about the story.
And, a promotional text telling the audience to forget what they know is a very deliberate signal. They are tearing down the narrative architecture of the first installment.
Yeah, they're not holding back.
Not at all. We aren't just looking at the next chapter of a familiar Chinese historical fantasy. We are looking at a fundamental mechanical shift in how the story actually operates.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to dig into the specific clues hidden inside this announcement to figure out the machinery behind that shift.
Right. Like, why exactly is this season being hyped as this massive evolution?
Exactly. We're going to examine the character isolation, the extreme escalation of worldly stakes, and a highly specific casting strategy that acts as the glue holding this entire massive universe together.
It's a lot to cover.
It is. So the source immediately drops us into the core conflict for Xu Feng Nian, stating, quote, "As the snowstorms of northern Liang return, Xu Feng Nian ventures alone into the northern wild."
Alone. That's the key word there.
Yes, and it explicitly describes this area as an untamed land. And then it presents the ultimate thesis of the season. Will he repeat his father's fate or forge his own path to kingship?
What's fascinating here is the psychological necessity of the wilderness.
How do you mean?
Well, in the grand tradition of historical epics, you cannot sever a generational curse while sitting in the house your father built.
Oh, that makes total sense.
Right. The physical threat of the northern wilds, the snowstorms, the sheer hostility of an untamed landscape is merely a catalyst. The real danger is that internal psychological threat of inevitability.
Because his father's legacy is so heavy.
Exactly. The text implies that his father's path to power carried a heavy, dark fate. A path paved with ruthlessness.
It's the classic dilemma of the heir. If you stay in northern Liang, surrounded by your father's generals, your father's advisors, your father's laws, every decision you make is filtered through his legacy.
You just become an echo.
Right. So walking out into the blizzard alone is literally the only way to prove to yourself that the strength belongs to you, and not just the title you inherited. It completely strips away the entire supporting cast that bailed him out previously.
It creates a blank slate. Geographically, he is off the map of civilization.
Completely off the grid.
And psychologically, he is devoid of his safety nets. In the known world, you survive on established resources and reputation. But in an untamed land, survival is entirely meritocratic.
It's just you and the elements.
Exactly. So the question of whether he will forge his own path to kingship suggests that true kingship in this universe isn't just handed down via bloodline.
It has to be earned.
Right. It has to be manifested through personal suffering and revelation.
Yeah.
The real question is, can a ruler emerge from the wilderness with a philosophy of power that doesn't require the same brutal, soul-crushing compromises his predecessor made?
But, I would argue the isolation also serves a secondary, maybe a more cynical narrative purpose.
Oh.
Well, while the protagonist is out in the freezing steppes, having his profound philosophical awakening about what kind of king he wants to be, his absence creates a massive power vacuum back in the civilized world.
Ah, right.
You take the stabilizing force off the board, and the rest of the world inevitably shatters.
That's a great point. The internal isolation is directly mirroring an external explosion of conflict.
Yeah.
Xu Feng Nian, stepping away from the center of power, acts as the trigger.
Yeah, and the source material doesn't just promise bigger battles, which, let's be honest, is standard promotional vernacular for literally any sequel.
Yeah, everyone says bigger battles.
Right, but this drops a massive genre-altering escalation in the lore.
He really does.
The text says, divine soldiers descend upon the land and extraordinary heroes emerge. The driving question of this entire spectacle becomes, who will rule the world?
That is a massive jump in stakes.
Huge. And I have to play devil's advocate here because this is where a lot of shows actually lose me.
Fair enough.
You build a deeply grounded first season based on gritty political intrigue, succession crises, and whispered conversations in dim throne rooms.
The human element.
Yes. And suddenly, we are talking about literal divine soldiers descending from the sky to fight for world domination. Doesn't drastically escalating the scale to involve the heavens risk entirely alienating the fan base that fell in love with the human-level politics?
It's a valid concern.
It just feels less like a natural evolution and more like, well, jumping the shark.
A lot of historical fantasies absolutely destroy their own internal logic when they attempt that leap. It's a massive risk.
Okay, so I'm not crazy for worrying about that.
No, not at all. But if we analyze the mechanics of epic storytelling, raising the stakes to a rule-the-world level and bringing in divine elements is often a structural requirement when dealing with a protagonist who is outgrowing their original limitations.
See, I push back on the idea that it's a requirement. If the political intrigue of Northern Liang was compelling enough to build a massive fan base, why can't the narrative just dive deeper into the complexities of human governance?
Like staying in the political sandbox.
Exactly. Why introduce gods into a story about men?
Because the concept of the divine in this specific genre is rarely about, literal monsters from the clouds. It is a manifestation of absolute, overwhelming power.
Okay, I see what you mean.
When the text mentions divine soldiers alongside the question of who will rule the world, it really touches upon the concept of the mandate of heaven.
Oh, wow.
The old order is so thoroughly broken that the foundational rules of reality are shifting. You cannot keep a character who is meant to redefine kingship playing in a regional political sandbox. He has mastered that level.
He needs a bigger test.
Right. The emergence of divine soldiers represents a paradigm shift that forces the protagonist to confront power on a philosophical, almost cosmic scale.
That actually brings up the second half of that quote from the source, which I think is really the saving grace of this whole escalation.
The heroes part.
Yeah. It says, extraordinary heroes emerge. Plural. Heroes.
The plurality is the most critical word in that entire sentence.
It tells us Xu Feng Nian is no longer the sole gravitational center of this universe.
Which is huge for fantasy.
Totally. In a standard fantasy setup, the hero levels up and the villain levels up to match him. It's just a binary conflict.
Very back and forth.
Right. But by emphasizing multiple extraordinary heroes emerging simultaneously alongside these divine soldiers, the source is promising a multifactional world.
The world isn't just getting bigger, it is getting significantly more crowded.
Which is so much more interesting.
Exactly. The power vacuum we discussed earlier isn't just drawing in mystical threats, it is elevating other human contenders who legitimately believe they are the protagonist of their own story.
Everyone thinks they're the hero.
Right. You have different perspectives, different moral codes, and different factions all clashing for the ultimate prize.
So it's not just man versus God.
No, the scale expands to include the divine, yes, but the human politics actually become infinitely more complicated because there are suddenly multiple legitimate superpowered contenders vying for the throne.
That is a massive narrative gamble, though. I mean, you are essentially telling the audience that the survival skills Xu Feng Nian learned in the Northern Wilds are going to immediately be tested against foes who operate on an entirely different plane of existence.
It's a trial by fire.
Literally. But bringing divine soldiers onto a screen presents a massive practical problem for a television production.
The visual execution.
Yes. The moment you introduce heavy CGI elements and world-ending stakes, you risk the material feeling completely weightless. So, if Xu Feng Nian actually wins, if he survives the Northern Wilds, outmaneuvers the extraordinary heroes, defeats the divine soldiers, and ultimately claims the power to rule the world.
Can he actually remain fundamentally different from his father?
Right. Doesn't the sheer horrific scale of a war for the world demand the exact same brutal compromises, the exact same paranoia, and the exact same sacrifices that built the fortress he walked away from in the first place?
It's a terrifying thought.
You can walk out into the cold alone to prove you are your own man, but if your ultimate goal is still to conquer an empire, you might inevitably have to become the monster you were trying to escape.
The throne itself might be the curse, regardless of who sits on it.
That is definitely something to mull over. Until next time, keep diving deep.